Hello and welcome back to the Rugby Pod. I'm Andy Rowan, Big Jim and Gertie are with me as usual. We'll be taking a look back at all the Premiership action, including a hell of a game between Quins and Bristol. Then we'll be having a chat all about the United Rugby Championship, the league's main man and CEO, Martin Anayi. So settle back, enjoy, make sure you're subscribed on Spotify. How's your weekend been, guys? Did you watch the Fury fight on the weekend?
And Wilder, if you're American, to our American listeners. Actually, they like Fury more than they like Wilder. In answer to your question, Andy Rowe, well, you know I did. You know I love my boxing. Probably could have been a top heavyweight boxer.
Like you could have been a top English second row as well if you had been half decent, but you had to play for Scotland, right?
Well, I had to be English, didn't I? And I found out that I wasn't Andrew. But yes, did watch the boxing. Loved it. Thank you, Andy Rowe. I know we are a rugby podcast, but as you know, and as Tyson Fury fights, every single time I put the one picture that I had with Tyson Fury and myself up on social media. So that's my association to him, but I absolutely loved it. Who the hell would be a boxer? Now, without bringing the tone down, and we know there's a big debate around concussions in NFL, in football, and obviously in our sport, rugby. And I'm looking at that, and it's like, goodness me, unbelievable. But anyway, the grotesque reality is that most people like boxing, and I'm one of them. And watching two of the best to go at it was phenomenal. And Goody, I saw a tweet pop up at like 2 a.m. from you saying you're about to watch my YouTube clips. I've woke up at 3 or 4.
Excited.
My phone's lighting up. I'm thinking, what's going on? So that's what I did. Before the fight, I was on my YouTube clips looking at them.
Yeah, so we'll come back to you in a minute, Jim, because I've got a couple of questions for you around your weekend. But yeah, Saturday night, me and the missus, we went out to watch Jason Manford at the London Palladium, which was good. He's fucking hilarious. And I tweeted that I was there, and he tweeted back saying thank you. So
I've got this feeling that comedy's dying, Andrew. I don't know why, because I'm not too sure what you can and can't say now. Who knows? And let's not get into that with your tweets on Friday night, but maybe we can get into that. But what's he like as a comedian? Can you hit me with a joke? Make me laugh.
Mate, you can't ask me that. And you can't plagiarise. What he did say is you can't plagiarise. No, he's hilarious. He's laughing about, telling us gags about COVID and what everyone's been through. The funniest one was
hit me. Go on, hit me with one. Make me laugh.
The one I found quite funny was when he was going on about Chris Whitty and all. They come out and they say, right, from a week on Friday, you've got to start wearing your masks. It's compulsory to wear your masks, right? So he's like, I compare that to parenting. We're talking about COVID, and we know it's a disease that kills. He says, like parenting, sometimes like the kids will be playing the road, and you don't give them 3 days' notice to stop playing the road. You don't say, "Oh, you can play the road till a week on Friday." So how is it with COVID that they were giving us these 10 days or whatever till you got to change your plans and do stuff? So he was funny. Like, he's honestly, we've spoken about it on here before. Northerners. He's from Manchester. He's from he had a relatively tough upbringing, and he's made a huge success of himself. And I don't know what it is about people from the north. They make me laugh. Manchester comedians,
teabagging,
the whole thing. So that was hilarious Saturday night. And then my face was actually genuinely hurting. He was a laugh a minute. And then we went out for dinner.
How would the amount of chewing that you've done in your life with your face be?
There's a lot of muscles.
Really?
Are they muscles? Or I think they're jowls or muscles. Anyway, it was hurting because he was funny. And then we've gone out for dinner afterwards at a place called Lucky Cat. And there was no cat food, Andy Rowe, just to let you know.
Well, why would it be called Lucky Cat then? I mean, what's the cat got to do with it?
Well, it's Gordon Ramsay's restaurant in Mayfair, and it's a Chinese restaurant. I'm trying to work out, is it called Lucky Cat because there's cat food, or there's cats being eaten?
No, I think it's probably. I don't want to stereotype, but with the quarter Chinese in me, it's probably the latter.
So, but yeah, I genuinely hope it wasn't cats that I was eating, because one, that would be illegal, but two, the price I paid for it fucking better not be cats. That's all I'm saying. But it was delicious.
And what time have you eaten at? What time are you eating these cats at?
So the table was at 10 o'clock. We went to watch Jason Manford 7:30 at the London Palladium. We were out there by 10 to 10, and we were back in Mayfair at about 10:05.
Eating cats in Mayfair.
Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank was sat behind me having a laugh.
Look at you. And look, not that it's enough about you, but the contrast. I went for another Toby Harbour on Sunday. You're in Mayfair Jimmy Hasselbank Collins, he was Leeds, weren't he?
Jimmy Floyd played for Chelsea.
Yeah, he was Leeds. He was Leeds as well, I think. Let's just say he was, because nobody football. And I'm in the Toby Carver on Sunday. What a contrast, Andrew, our lives. We always say it. It's
just a bit of planning, Jim. So I've got back. Me and the missus have had a good night, a couple of bottles of wine, a few G&Ts on top of that. And I'm thinking, I'm in bed, and I'm thinking, I'm
another baby. Oh, sorry.
I had one in my own stomach, I think, at that point. But I'm thinking, I'm going to watch the boxing. I'm going to stay up and watch the boxing. And we're in bed for about 2:00, and she's gone and I flicked the telly on. She's like, if you're watching that, I'm going in the other room. So she's gone in the other room, and I'm thinking, happy days. I'll start YouTubing videos of Jim to get me in the mood, getting filled in or filling people in. And then by 3:00, my eyes are literally as heavy as you like, starting to feel a bit rough. I'm like, do you know what? I'll pay for it when I wake up. So I woke up at 7:00, watched it. The mother-in-law was here. She was looking after the kids, and what a fight it was, James. So I did tweet you at about 1:45 or whatever time it was. And not long after that, I decided, I'm going to watch it at 7:00 in the morning when I've had a few hours sleep. So Sunday, up at the mighty Wasps, the Andy Good Suite at the Ricoh Arena, was hard work. The drive up, I was just feeling a bit rough, and there was a lot of blokes floating around on Sunday, absolutely shattered. And I'll go back to you now, James, because you've obviously got yourself up for the fight, haven't you, to watch it? Do you want to explain to the masses what happened on Friday night in your house?
What happened on Friday?
Well, you phoned me Saturday. We were having a good chat. You're like, the fucking kids are ill. I said, oh, did you get up with them? You're like, no, the missus did it. I was working all day Saturday. I said, but I bet you get up in the middle of the night for the boxing tonight. Then he goes, fucking too right.
I would not have got up for the boxing. I'd done my back in sneezing. Can you believe it?
You what?
I know. I sneezed and my back went again. Not as bad this time, though, but to the point where I couldn't get up with the kids back. I can't get up with the kids. But the boxing was on. The back was hurt. I couldn't sleep. So I got up and, you know what Beck's like. She's great like that, isn't she?
Yeah. So she's a real.
But look, I took her to Toby Carver out on Sunday, and it was a real treat for her because we did have an apple crumble. It might not have been apple. It might have been apples out of a tin, which is still apple, I think, and custard. So, that was it. But I did the big game at the weekend, and we maybe talk a little bit about the URC. It's a big URC podcast today. Well, there'll be a slight bit of it. But I couldn't get up on Friday. I'm working Saturday. The big one, #always Edinburgh versus Stormers, but actually the Glasgow versus the Emirate Lions as well. So I had to be at my very best, lads.
Yeah. So you told the missus, you get up and deal with the kids because you're going to work on Saturday. And then you get home on Saturday after the game, and then you're fine to get up to watch the boxing at 4 a.m. I like your priorities.
Well, I weren't fine, but I just did. I just felt like I had to. I'm next for Tyson. If you were fighting, I'd get up and watch it.
There you go. And what I did see on Saturday, Jim, you've gone from one extreme to the other.
Black tie, I went.
Well, you've gone a couple of weeks ago. You've gone with the shocking Pelstaff pink, red, suede, corduroy blazer jacket, whatever it was. This week you've gone dressed like an Undertaker, the old long black coat. Well, I mean, which one are you, James?
I thought Bobby Skinstad was going to turn up, so I wanted to go black tie for him, just because he's that suave and that handsome that I wanted to do my best for him. But he didn't come. It was Tina Stelport in the end. Not that he was underdressed, but he weren't looking like Bobby Skinstad. But I'm just mixing it up. I need to know what sticks, but I know that Bell staff were well happy. They were happy with the interaction. Good or bad press, Andrew, as you know. Yeah. It brings up the followers, it brings up the interaction. So the Redcoat will be out again soon. Hey, even if we get down to Cardiff. Sorry, I'll say that again. Hey, when we go down to Cardiff later this year in November.
On the 3rd of November. Wednesday, 3rd of November, we're back there. It's exactly 2 years after we were last on the streets of Cardiff. We've got a live show, and it's going to be at the depot. It's in the lead up to the Wales versus South Africa game. So I hope you don't still think comedy's dead, Jim. I think it might be just a hangover from a couple of weeks ago when you crash and burn, because we're gonna need you on your best game, bringing your A game to the streets of Cardiff on the 3rd of November, Jim.
Well, I will do. I should say, last time we were in Cardiff, we brought Andy Powell. Now, a lot's changed in the last 2 years, and we might put him to the wolves and see. He can test the water. I'm not too sure if Andy Powell's coming. He's not been confirmed. I don't know if anyone knows Welsh folklore, but there's a golf buggy story out there that never been told. But we'll wheel him out and we'll see how that goes down maybe, and test the waters to where we can go.
Well, tickets are available on Eventbrite. Just go on there and search for the Rugby Pod. It's just 20 quid and you'll get a free pint of Coors with that as well. Just before we get into the Premiership action, agents versus clubs for our Goody. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty big, to be honest. Ultimately, and there's two sides to every story, right? So what the clubs have come out and done, and there's a whole play around HMRC and what they've done in football around agents' fees and where the liability lies and all this stuff. Now, as it stands, for the last God knows how many years, effectively 20 odd years, clubs have paid the agents' fees on behalf of the players. So when they're negotiating, the agent works with the club and with the player, and the agent's fee gets paid by the club to the agent. And that's part of the whole package, right? So over the last few years, and I can't remember the exact date, I won't say. So over the last few years, what's happened is players have now had 50% of the agent's fee put on their P11D as a benefit in kind. So it's taxable. So you've got 50% of your agent's fee on there that you have to pay tax on as P11D when you're doing your tax return, as everyone does for various benefit in kinds that you have, whether that be private medical care or all those things. Now, what the clubs have done is they've looked at it, and some of them have been more vociferous about this than others. They've gone, agents' fees cost us collectively 6 million quid a year. And so with what's happened in the pandemic, with the fact that there's no bums on seats, their revenues are down, clubs are looking to cut costs where they can. And what the clubs are saying is, we are not paying the agents' fees anymore. The players, you're going to have to pay them because of this issue around HMRC and what they've done in football around it, which the agents have pushed back and gone, that's actually no relevance at all, because there's no transfer market in rugby, because effectively everyone is a bosman, or you're out of contract and you move. Very rarely is there a transfer fee, like once in a blue moon. So there's no transfer market per se in rugby. So what the agents are saying is that's irrelevant. And actually what the agents are saying to the clubs is, you're just trying to get out of paying it because it's 6 million quid that you don't want on your costs and everything like that as a business. So there's a big row between the agents and the clubs now, whereby the agents are shut down. They're not negotiating with clubs at the minute for players that they represent. And effectively, some of the clubs and PRL are trying to shoehorn this in to basically say that the players take control and pay everything to their agent, which becomes a massive cost then to the player, more so than the club. And what a lot of the clubs are doing, and I go back, Jim, and I hate to bring it back up, it goes back to Saracens many, many years ago, where Ed Griffiths was doing the contracts at Saracens. He'd get a player in and go, I don't want you to deal with your agent anymore. We'll offer you more money if you don't go with your agent than we're going to offer you to an agent. So that puts the player then in a position where he goes, oh shit, what do I say to my agent? Obviously, a player wants as much money as he can earn. And if he's going to be offered more to not go with an agent than he is to go with an agent. And that's how Saracens initially started getting things around the salary cap, which is where we got to a couple of years ago with the massive issue around Saracens spending and all stuff like that, because they wanted to keep it in-house. So the agents, they've got a body where it's called the Association of Rugby Agents that, they all have to be licensed. So basically what it was, where they all have to be licensed to go through exams and all this stuff from the RFU. So there's no kind of like Wild West with agents just undercutting each other, and it's meant to be a kind of regulated union now. And I know there's a lot of infighting between the agents as well, because the chairman, who hasn't been mandated to act on behalf of all the agents, is a bloke called Mark Spores. Now, from my experience, Mark Spores is as useful as a chocolate teapot.
He was my agent.
I know, and he's as a bloke.
So what sport is he doing now? Let's just get this right. He promised me a pair of Adidas boots, and they didn't come through. They gave them to Alan Wynne-Jones, which I weren't happy about, and that's how we had a fallout. And I changed agent, who promised me a pair of night boots, but they never came to fruition. So I moved agent. So what Spores has he got to do with this then?
Well, Spores is the chairman. I think he's probably self-voted to be chairman of the Association of Rugby Agents. Now, he's trying to speak to the clubs, and he's just going in there bullish, going, well, none of the players will sign any contracts with you then. The clubs are going back and going, well, we ain't paying it, so deal with it, so come up with a resolution. What they need to do is sit around a table and find some middle ground, because
Or in rugby, sitting around the table, that just happens all the time,
yeah,
does it?
I think
Does it works?
But again, the problem with it is it's the players who are the pawns here who are the ones that are going to be affected most. Now, I know PRL put some numbers out around what it looks like from a player's perspective, and they're not going to be impacted financially, but they are, because the RPA, David Hopley, has put a statement out, and he shows actually the true workings out of the difference between paying your agent yourself individually or the club's paying it, and the whole issue around it. It's just become messy. So again, we can't get through many months in rugby union without there being some drama somewhere off the field. And it, sometimes you worry that takes away from the product on the field. Well, it certainly doesn't in the Premiership this weekend, because the games are unbelievable. But there's the clubs and the agents are so far apart at the minute that I can't see how there can be a quick resolution. And ultimately, all the players that are out of contract, they're not speaking to the clubs at the minute, and they're the guys that are potentially missing out on contracts. And then you take that to the wider picture in the Premiership. You're going to get no world stars wanting to come to the Premiership because you've got to pay your own agents' fees. Those world stars could go to France or Japan, where the clubs will happily pay the agents' fees. And off the back of it, those guys are going to earn more money. So, it's a very dangerous position that the clubs and the agents are putting the players in. And ultimately, it's the players that are being affected the most by the current situation. But you hope that common sense prevails. First thing to do, common sense prevails. Get rid of Mark Spores as your chairman, because a lot of the agents don't agree with him anyway, as useful as a chocolate teapot. And I know a lot of the agents are infighting around what he's saying. So it's a battle that, they're infighting with themselves. The clubs aren't actually all agreeing with the hard stance they're taking, and the players are in the middle. So hopefully they can find some common ground, and then they can start negotiating deals again, and they find a way that the players pay some, but the clubs pay some as well.
Just quickly, what sort of money are we talking about the players having to pay individually? Like, what sort of a percentage is it, roughly?
It ranges 7%. Yeah, 7% is the go rate, isn't it?
Yeah, 7% is about average, but it ranges from 5% to 10%, sometimes slightly bigger, 12%, depending on, if it's a renegotiation, I think it's at 5% or something, or, but it averages out around 7%, 7.5% of a player's contract. So, the boys at the minute, the way the clubs are going about the business, it's going to affect the players, and the players are going to have to pay it. And they're paying it after tax, effectively. So it's out of their pot of money that's already been taxed, which is why it's an extra cost on top. So, it's a messy situation at the minute, but hopefully common sense will prevail and they'll find some middle ground.
You didn't give your opinion, though, Andrew. You didn't give your opinion. So do you think, and I've got an opinion on this, having been a player and knowing agents and still having an agent, have you got an opinion? Do you think they need, I'll give you my opinion. I think players need agents. Yeah. I think it's as simple as that. And that's part of professional sport. It's a part of being a top level athlete. What other sport, and this is what pisses me off about rugby. Like, I understand the situation that it's in. I understand COVID. I understand costs, and I understand no fans in stadiums. I get all that. What other sport do you not have top level athletes not having agents? Yeah. Team sports. Yeah. Come on, man.
No,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, because bully is probably the wrong word, but you can be backed into a corner being a young lad, let's say he's on 50 grand and he's worth 120 grand. Just use their numbers as an example. And your agent's going in there and he's going around looking at the different opportunities at different clubs. Say he goes to a Worcester. And Worcester's like, mate, we'll pay him 200 grand. And you're like, well, I don't really want to go to Worcester. I'd rather stay and get what I'm worth at this club here. I'd rather get 120 grand at Wasps. And the head coach comes into you, not Lee Blackett, but like a Dino or someone who's intimidating like that, or an intimidating coach comes in, a Vern Cotter, and says, look, mate, we're only going to give you 80 grand, take it or leave it. But I'll be very careful. I'll be very, very careful if you leave, because, your development, I'll sign it. And next thing, you've done yourself out of 40, 50 grand, or you've done yourself out of more. Yeah. So this is the thing. It's not necessarily about, I can understand actually, if you're a top level player. So if you're a Mauro Itoje, let's just use him as an example, and you're a £1 million player, or you're a Pietau, a semi-dry Randra, you could ultimately hire an agent as a consultant and say, look, mate, I'm about to do this deal. Go and test the market. Go and have a look what's out there. Okay, you've got £1 million here. You've got 900 grand here. You've got 1.2 million here. And you could do a separate deal with that agent and broker a fee between him to advise you, do your lawyer's fees, blah, 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 blah. But it isn't them players we're talking about. It's the masses.
Yeah.
It's the majority of the squad players where you're talking 10, 20 grand. It's a significant amount of money. And then having to employ an accountant on top of that as well to deal with how you end up paying an agent. Yeah. So my point being, players need agents and the clubs need to pay them.
100% the players need agents. You know, you alluded to it earlier, Jim, around my situation. So very early on in my career, and actually it coincided with when I was leaving Saracens, I had an agent at the time who was trying to push me to go and play for Rotherham because it suited.
Hang on, for
Rotherham, exactly. And he was mate, go to Rotherham. You know, just go to there to the end of the season, play well, you know, and then we'll get you a deal somewhere else. It transpired that this agent owed Rotherham a bit of a favour. He was mates with the head coach at the time. And I'm like, mate, I ain't going to Rotherham for love nor money. Nothing against Rotherham, but they played.
Sheffield's a great night out, though.
I think they played 8, lost 8. They were definitely going down. And I said to him, I ain't playing. There's no interest there. The flip side of that, Dino had phoned me directly and he said, Goody, I want you to come back to Leicester. I'm like, Dino, mate, I'll drive up there now and sign the contract. So I phoned my agent on the way up to Leicester and I'm like, you spoke to anyone else? Have you spoke to, you spoke to Leicester? I heard they might be keen. He's like, yeah, no, I spoke to them. They're not keen on you at all. And at that point I said, listen, and I won't name him. I basically told it. I said, fuck you, you're a liar. Don't ever talk to me ever again.
Well, the off-field stuff doesn't appear to be having an effect of what's going on the field. Did you guys catch the Quins Bristol game on Friday night? Of course you did.
Nah, I didn't see it.
What are you on about, Jim? Oh, my game. It was phenomenal. 21-0 up Bristol's were, and they were on fire in that first sort of 25 minutes. And Quins were a little bit shell-shocked, I think. And then I'm just like, Marcus Smith.
It doesn't matter.
Marcus Smith, make him England captain, bring him on, make him England captain. And
how good was that try?
I mean, they score 50-odd points from when he comes on. Oh, I feel sorry for Tommaso Allen.
Tommy Allen, yeah.
I mean, Tommy Allen, poor bloke. He's gone off. They're 21-0 down. Marcus Smith comes on. You ain't ever playing again, Tommy, unless Marcus Smith's away with England because he was ridiculous, wasn't he? His touches, ball in hand, going to the line, feeding people.
Confident, Andrew.
Yeah, mate, absolutely ridiculous. So if he ain't starting for England as first choice 10 in the autumn, Eddie Jones, take a walk straight back to Japan or Australia or wherever you're coming from because he was world class, out and out world class, wasn't he?
He was class. Yeah, I mean, did I have Quins in my top 4 or not? Not that it matters.
No, Jim, you didn't.
Did I not put them in?
No, you didn't.
I had this chat with Ray Vozan today and I said, I piggybacked the hysteria around Quins. I was like, I'm sure I picked Quins in the top 4. He said, no, I don't think you did. I said, oh, why not? I didn't. But yeah, I mean, Bristol, again, we love Bristol, but there's a problem there somewhere, isn't there? Because, like you said, to go 21-0 up or whatever it was, and then to lose that game again off the back of the semi-final from last year, it's almost as if they've been found out. Play, and there's not much else to their game, which there is. Obviously. So is it back to the drawing board for a team like Bristol's? It's hard because we are still early in the season. We speak about momentum's everything, but this weekend was all about Quins. Yeah. So we can talk about Bristol's another time, see how they get on this weekend. But fair play. You know what I mean? Look at the backbone of that team now. English.
Yeah.
As well. Young English players. Lewis Liner, he might not be English. If he gets capped, he will be, but he could be Australian or Italian.
He's English. He's English.
Yeah, do you think he'll get capped?
Yeah, I think he will. I mean, he's made the decision at the minute that he wants to play for England because he went into the England training squad and all this stuff. I did see last week that the Australians have said, we're still going to ask him if he wants to have a conversation around coming back to Australia.
Well, his brother's gone, hasn't he? His brother's gone. But Lewis did say that he's happy to play for any. Yeah. So he's left the door open. His dad, smart man, lovely man, legend of a man, Michael. He's obviously said to him, mate, you need to keep the doors open. It's professional sport. But yeah, I actually wouldn't have had Lewis Liner in my top 4. Not that, again, that's about bloody what I think or whatever I say. But actually, the more and more that I watch him, you're thinking, mate, this kid could be the starting wing for England for a long, long time.
Yeah, the only thing I was disappointed in Quins was they took him off. He'd scored 2 and they took him off.
Maybe,
I was like, leave him on, let him get an hat trick because no doubt he'd have scored it. But they were phenomenal. You know, Tyrone Green at fullback as well. Very small player, very slight, punches way above his weight. So hard to bring down in the tackle. They're just playing with excitement, with like vigor, and Dombrandt looks like a proper athlete as well now. But people said before about he had a uni body or whatever. He's stripped down again, and he looks completely the real deal. See his offload for one of the tries. Yeah, they're playing with a ridiculous amount of confidence. Mate, when you tie a prop who ain't scored in 134 Premiership games, throws a dummy, and then sprints in from about 25 metres, when I'm saying, where's anyone in Bristol trying to tackle him? Because they're absolutely... That's the
worry.
I'll be honest with Bristol, they're absolutely fucked. Like, fitness-wise, this is coming from me, Andy Fitness here. They didn't play any pre-season games. They flew out the blocks, and then they shot their bolt. So there was one bit about Bristol, and it's credit to Quins. They must have played 12 phases, chucking it from side to side to side, thinking they're eventually just going to break Quins down. They got about 2 metres, then they lose the ball, then errors come in, then they got smashed at the breakdown, then Quins just turned the ball over, and they're playing with energy because they're letting Bristol do a lot of hard donkey work, chucking the ball around with no real oomph going forwards. And then they make the error, and Quins will capitalise on it. So it was phenomenal from Quins. From 21-0 down, Bristol have got a lot of work to do. I mean, I tweeted on Friday night, best thing I can do is lock the doors on Monday morning and just drink together. But that's not going to help the fitness either, is it? So what do I know? Because their fitness was shocking.
Wasn't a bad game at Gloucester either. Sale almost pinched it. Did you see that game?
My goodness, mate. Yes, I did. Could you imagine if you are Gloucester
and you lost
and that driving maul is going over and you're thinking, here we go. Here we go.
It could have been, had they not scored it, it would have 100% been a penalty try. You saw, I think it was Ben Morgan came in at the side, but because they scored it, the ref gave it. Now, two things.
Again, here we go. Sorry, this is the sighting watch because I didn't even think about that. That's not even on my radar when I'm watching that. But over to the sighting commish.
Well, it didn't need to be a penalty try because they scored it, so it's fine. And two things I'll say. Sale scored a try with 30 seconds to go, and they're just trying to rush the conversion, rightly so. Unfortunately, it was a drop kick, didn't go over. Then they get the try at the end when they're into sort of overtime. And the two things I say, the lad that took the conversion, Tom Curtis, who is, for people listening, he is the stepson of big friend of the show, big friend of mine, Dean Schofield. He's a youngster. It was a really tough kick. The one thing I will say, Gloucester fans, credit to you. And I don't often say this. Absolute credit to you because it was a kick to win the game, a youngster kicking it, and you expect booing and all this stuff. They didn't do it at all. So I was really impressed with Gloucester fans. So tip the slipper to you boys. There was a massive cheer, right, when it missed. Of course there would be because that means that Gloucester won the game. But I've kicked in front of the shed and you get heckled, you get abused, you get the eat all, you get all sorts of stuff. And fair play to them. They didn't make any noise when Tom Curtis was taking the kick. But the other thing I need to say, I can't remember who was doing the commentary for it. I watched it. He kept calling him Curtis Langdon. I'm like, Curtis Langdon's a hooker, mate. And you're talking about a fly half kicking goals. So he's got a big future, Tom Curtis, as well. He's a lovely lad. I actually used to do a bit of kicking coaching with him when Dino and I played at Worcester together. He was about 12 years old. And that's probably why I missed the kick at the weekend. So sorry, Sale fans. I do apologise. But yeah, Gloucester were good. Hastings again, brilliant. Atkinson threw a lovely seed. Lewis re-signed. What am I on about? Gloucester going to finish bottom of the league? I mean,
ridiculous. I was going to call you out on that. That's 2 from 2 now. Comfortable win against Worcester. They look good against Sale. Sale, obviously, a few changes, but when you got Lewis re-signing the old chip, and who's picking that up? Not me to tell about that, but obviously, as a youngster, he's in.
Yeah. So, Gloucester were good. Really impressed with them. Although they did nearly throw it away. So, imagine being a Gloucester fan had they lost that. Imagine being a Gloucester player on a Monday morning had they lost that. But, Sale are faltering a little bit, aren't they?
Saracens. They went behind early against Newcastle, but managed to fight their way back in, Jim.
I thought Newcastle looked very good, to be fair. Saracens, a few mistakes, a few kind of missed tackles, which you wouldn't normally associate. But Newcastle look good. Like, you've got to give credit to them in the way that they play, their backs, that they're physical up front. And Saracens are still warming into it. Is that the right kind of word to use? Like, Saracens at home, back at the StoneX Stadium, and you look at the profile of the team, and it is world class. Mako, Jamie,
Billy,
obviously. Faz. Just to name a few. Sean Maitland on the wing. Max Malins playing unbelievably well. Ben Earl.
Sean Maitland was lucky not to get a red.
Yeah, I wouldn't say.
Nah, I think that's
yellow.
Yellow was the right call there as the sighting officer. I was pretty. I feel yellow was a right call. There was enough mitigation.
Right, there was, yeah. But I mean, Jamie George obviously got player of the match. Andrew, player of the match. He got
man of the match.
I'm going based on commentary. Rugby player. He got player of the match.
But here's the thing, Jim. How awkward is it? You're trying to remember not to say man of the match. You're like, I've got to say player because we've got to appease people. No, man of the match.
Jamie George got man of the match at the weekend. And you can see he had the bit between his teeth. He was obviously, it means a lot to him. And you tweeted, I think, Goody, that's him back in the autumn test squad. I hope so. Yeah. He deserves it. Like, you know, I saw the stat come up on TV that he's played 2 games or something this season. Is that right? Or he started 2 games this season or something ridiculous. Basically, he's not played a lot of rugby. But he was good. Swinnow butchered a try that I would have scored.
Mate, Swinnow, the reason Saracens won, they went back to type, right? They went back to their power game. They went back to drive until the cowsheds and back. And it was all about Swinnow, mate. I thought he was the leader. Thank God they got a decent Scottish second row there now.
Gosh.
Bit of a, well, it wasn't really a thriller, but Wasps ended Saints unbeaten start the season, didn't they, Goody?
Yeah, they did. Interesting game, actually, because the first half was, as you'd expect, 2 teams that like to chuck it around. They've got errors in them, but they try and play a high octane. Sorry, but they try and play this high octane game where, you know, it's ball out, tackle, offloading. You know, a couple of tries in the first half were class, one from each team. Augustus, the number 8, picked out a lovely line. Then the offload to Matavesi to waddle his way over was pretty good for Saints in the first half. Dan Robson breaking up the outside after Ogre's lovely little dummy and go through was class as well. And it was a really exciting first half. Wasps were hanging on in there. They should have been a lot further down, I thought, at half time. But then second half was a bit turgid in the second half. It went back to set piece. You know, Wasps, they controlled the game nicely. Saints lost their discipline completely, gave a load of pens away. And what Wasps did this week, and I spoke to Lee Blackett before the game, they lost their heads at Newcastle. And, you know, I mentioned it last week in the bad, how they threw the game away with 30 seconds to go when they were in Newcastle's 22. This week, their game management was spot on, I thought, in the second half, kicked their goals. I know Jacob Immonen missed a couple. Jimmy Gopperth comes on at 46 years of age and he's slotting kicks for fun. So yeah, they were good, Wasps. You know, Saints, and we had Courtney on here last week, didn't we? They were 3 from 3 last week, but Courtney was open and honest and said we weren't playing that well. They played really well in the first half, Saints, and then their discipline went to pieces in the second half, and Wasps capitalised.
Did you see Chris Boyd's interview after? He was raging, weren't he?
Raging.
A fair play. He opened up the players, didn't he? He said that the guys who came off the bench were obviously annoyed that they weren't playing, and they were the reason. Yeah, they were the reason. So you know,
Alex Waller ain't scared of giving a penalty away either, is he?
Hey, who am I to argue?
Exactly.
And Exeter are back to the best now that they've got their big names back.
Why are you being horrible to Worcester saying that would have been an easy one for them? Now they've got him back.
Why are you saying that, Jim?
Because I don't want to eat my bloody Timberland boot, that's it.
True. Yeah, I mean, Sam Simmons, 2 tries. Johnny Hill was back. Obviously, Hoggy's back at 15. Luke Karansicki. You know, Exeter have got quality in their squad. And we said it, you know, at the start of the season, they lost to Leicester away. But they were back to their best. And Worcester, 40-odd points down, weren't they, at one point? But it was Exeter being class, I think. Their pick and go. Yeah, Dave Ewers makes a massive difference for them. So they've got some oomph again up front, which they've missed with the big names missing.
Leicester still unbeaten, but they had to work for it against Irish, didn't they?
Oh, my balls. I was loving it. Absolutely loving it. Fair play to Leicester again. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can sit here and talk them up and act as if we're super fans. Just find a way to win now. And a big part of that is their driving line-up and their forwards now. So, you know, obviously Fordy's playing well as well for them, makes a big difference. Well, it will make a big difference that he's not away with England. Whether or not he's out of contract, whether or not he's leaving, whether or not he wants to make a point. I'm not saying that is the only reason.
Why being horrible to George Ford, mate? Why being horrible to George Ford?
I'm not. But yeah, it's a tough place to go and play. And it's one of them where you could talk about complacency No disrespect to London Irish, but you have a couple of big wins. You beat Saracens in last play of the game a couple of weeks ago, and then you go to London Irish and you lose. Do you know what I mean? You can make excuses for that, but no, they've got a driving line out now, which is arguably, I'd say, the best driving line out in the league.
Yeah, do you know what I've heard?
Some games.
Do you know what I've heard they're calling it, Jim? They just call it Jim Hamilton, because it's basically from your day. Brett Deacon's brought it back, apparently. It's your DNA all over that team. Like shit hands, but fucking hell of a driving more.
There you go. You're welcome.
Jim, I know you're desperate. You're champing at the bit to talk about the United Rugby Championship. You were watching Edinburgh's 20-all draw against the Stormers, weren't you?
I was, yeah. The Stormers called it before the game. They're growing.
You called the draw?
Didn't call the draw. Called the fact that the narrative was going to be that they are getting better. The Stormers were smashing Munster last week at Thomond Park. So watching that game back and then watching Edinburgh lose to Benetton in injury time over there, I knew it was going to be a good game. And I know we always talk about #always Edinburgh naturally because this is where I live now, but it was a proper game. First half, Edinburgh went up 14-0. Is there a number? Zillion? Nil. They say Zil in Scotland. Zilch. The Stormers, when they get their players back, my goodness me, they can tackle a human being, is all I'm saying. And it's easy to say, South African team's physical. My goodness me, I'm watching #always carrying on the halfway line, going through 10 phases, thinking, someone knock it off your head, or just kick it into the stands and get it off. But it was good to see the South African teams playing well. The South Sea Sharks, the Seashell Sharks, they've got all these names, like the Emirates Lions, the DHL Stormers. It's hard not to say DHS and Chelsea's, but they beat the Ospreys. The Ospreys, my goodness me, you've got Abysmal and you've got Abysmal. Let's just be honest about it. My goodness me.
That bad?
Yeah, they were that bad. And what else have we got for you?
You got Leinster, Munster and Ulster are still at the other end, aren't they?
Hold on, we just need to hold the horses a minute. The fucking Dragons won a game, finally.
No.
They did away at Connacht, 35-22.
Well, we've got Martin on the phone now and he can have a chat to us about all things United Rugby Championship, CEO of the competition. Martin Anayi, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks very much for having me on.
Martin, thanks for coming on. I'll probably just start because I say heavily involved. Someone said the face. That's only me. That's what my mum said. You're the face of the URC, which obviously isn't the case.
No, you are. You are.
So
thank you very much,
Martin. It's not a great face to have as your face of the league, please. I think it's more Stevie Ferris, but there we go.
Yeah, you could arguably say that. But look, I've been involved in the Pro 14, the commentary stuff, the TV stuff for the past few years, and I'm the first one to say that it needed freshening up and it needed a kind of reboot. That's kind of what we've got over the last few months. But just a little bit about mine, what it's been like in the build up to that, because obviously we can talk about COVID and we can talk about the difficulties that the leagues, the league and the unions around the Pro 14, what it was called before, and the Pro 12 before that, how difficult it has been. But what's it been like trying to restructure this and get these South African teams in? And are you happy with where everything is at the minute?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy. I think there's always bits that you think can go even better, and you can. But we started off as you said, Pro 12, Pro 14. It was always like a movement towards getting these South African teams in. We made that commitment probably in 2015-16. And once we were sort of on that path, it was always the big four that we were sort of after, if you like, and. We were pretty fortuitous in one sense that through COVID, it just caused mayhem around the world, and in rugby definitely. The Super Rugby organisation, SANZAR, decided that they didn't want the South African teams anymore. So it was a little bit of vision and a little bit of sort of pushing, but in the end, we were sort of willing recipients of these teams who needed to find a home. So. A bit of luck. I think what's happened also is that the world of rugby is trying to get into a calendar that works. At the moment, it doesn't work as effectively as it could do. You, as an international player, are pulled in too many directions. Is it, do I play for my club? Do I play for my country? You shouldn't be pulled in that direction. It should be clear. It should be a pretty straight line between when you get into the academy, play for your first team, play for your club, and then play for your country, and then play for your Lions if you're lucky enough. And at the moment, we haven't got quite right. So there's still a bit of work to do. But yeah, pretty happy how it's gone so far. URC 1 off to a pretty good start, but more to come, I think.
I can imagine it was exceptionally tough, not only because of COVID, but also trying to fit around the South African teams. And we're seeing them playing on our shores at the minute. And when I say on our shores, I mean obviously in Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and Italy. We've seen South Africa just come off the red list. How difficult has it been for you to kind of piece the fixtures together, piece all the games together, the travel alongside COVID as well? Because we've seen a brilliant start to the league, haven't we? From someone that didn't really watch a lot of Pro 14 initially to now watching the last sort of couple of weeks where the quality has definitely gone up a notch, hasn't it? So how hard was it for you to piece everything together? Because it must have taken some juggling.
Yeah, I think the main thing is we wanted that. We wanted the quality of the product to go up. And I know product is used in a sporting term, so don't use that word, but we talked to all of our club CEOs, pretty much all of our head coaches, a lot of the players, and the one thing that they said to us was, if you're going to make a change from Pro 12, Pro 14 into URC, just whatever you do, make it better. So every time we take the pitch, we want to play in a more competitive game, even if that means playing slightly less games overall. When we take the pitch, we want it to mean something. So we kind of took that on board, and we've come off international weekends as a result of that. Brought what will be 4 very strong teams in, and they're starting to really understand European rugby now, which is, they're quick learners. If you add back into that probably 21, 22 players from the Springbok camp, they're going to be super, super competitive because they're winning away from home now, which is what the Cheetahs and the Kings before them couldn't do. And what that should do over time is mean the likes of Leicester and Munster, who quite honestly put out a second team and won at the weekend, they're not going to be able to do that as many times or as often. What that might do is then make the league more competitive, of higher quality. It might also mean that some of those players that are in Leinster's team, because they get 10, 12 games a year, might move to some of the other provinces and make them stronger. So, there's sort of a short-term goal to make the league stronger, which we think we've done, and then a mid and long-term to make it even more competitive. And hopefully a league that rivals the best leagues in the world on its own merits.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking and sticking on the South African theme with the teams, I personally think it's brilliant. It's fantastic for the league that the 4 strongest teams have come in and their performances have got better and better. Obviously, the weekend, Edinburgh Stormers, I was commentating on that, and the Stormers looked phenomenal in some parts of that. I think the big question will be around the return of the internationals and how that fits in. We obviously knew, or you guys obviously knew coming into this, that the way that the calendar has fallen with the Lions Tour, with the Championship being played here, there and everywhere, obviously over in Australia, with the Autumn Nations Cup being played in the UK, that the South African teams were going to be hindered. The fact that they're in a bubble, the fact that their home games are going to be played in Europe because of COVID. Do you think there'll be an easier transition probably next season with trying to line up the international players being able to play for their clubs? Because there's no doubt about it, even speaking to the South African franchise coaches, they're down to their bare bones and they haven't got their best players. How do you think that will unfold with the South African players coming back into the team? Because there's still a large international window for them to get through. So arguably they might not be here till January, February.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably one area where we obviously didn't know about the COVID bubble being an enhanced bubble. I think they might have 50 odd players in that bubble. And so you don't normally have that all in Australia. You're going to get more players being released to the clubs. I think there's got to be a better alignment anyway out of the Rugby Championship to either start earlier perhaps or even move its dates completely to align with international rugby globally. The club season, though, I think is it's still pretty patchy in a sense because you're going to have this autumn block, and do you play through that block or not? We decided not to. The Prem top 14 can play through it because they're less impacted by international rugby because they've got one national team fed by 13 or 14 teams. So even if you're Saracens, as you know, Jim, that's going to be like 5 or 6 players. Sometimes our teams, and not teams that can afford it, like Treviso, Benetton will lose 18 players. Right, so you just cannot ask Benetton to play across the international weekend and expect them to win, because they don't have that depth in Italy. So it was structurally not sound. The Pro 12 or Pro 14 was not structurally sound, because it just didn't allow the likes of the Italian teams to get any better. It actually penalised them for having international players. So I think that bit is going to get stronger for the league. The South Africans should have a better chance of playing earlier in future seasons. And we're going to get them playing against each other in the Six Nations, so you're not going to get them out of kilter with our own team. So it should work better in future seasons. But it's still something we're pushing for, which is, we think that there could be slightly less international rugby overall, but to maintain its value, and then allow a bit more breathing room for the club game.
We mentioned about potentially some of the higher profile players coming back to play in the URC. You imagine players like Ebenezer, for example, going back to the Stormers, or Chesley and Colby leaving the top 14. Obviously, it's just been a deal to Toulon. What is the salary cap in the URC? Because I know that some teams don't spend as much. Obviously, there's rumours that Leinster have a huge budget to spend with. Are you allowed to share them details of actually what the salary cap looks like in the URC?
Yeah, I think that's a bit I would push for. So one of the big changes actually did with URC has come about, but also with CBC coming in a year ago, was we as a entity are going to be, or are now, on the board at EPCR. So whereas before it was the unions on EPCR, it's now the 3 leagues.
Yeah.
CEOs on EPCR. And so our sort of main driver there is, what can we do across certainly European rugby, but probably in future in Japan also, and in the US, is there a salary cap system that can actually be applied universally? Because the moment you apply the system that we have in England, we have in France, that's not applied universally, that creates potential weaknesses in the system. People go to somewhere they're going to get paid more, right, if everyone's not being paid the same. The reason why you can't pay everybody, or have one consistent salary cap system, is we're not all selling our rights together. So the French league is worth 112 million euros a year to Canal Plus. We're not getting that, right? So you have to have different models at the moment to be able to adjust and flex to those commercial realities. The reality in Ireland is it's quite hard to tell, because the IRFU will pay some of the salary, Leinster will pay some of the salary for different players. So it's quite hard to tell what the salary is in Ireland. But I can almost categorically say they are not winning because they are spending more than everybody else. They're winning because they've got 52 players that are better as a squad than everybody else, and they use them so effectively. But
they managed to keep their best players, though. That's the big thing, is it? That's where the thing is with Leinster. Sorry, the thing is with Leinster and the Irish teams, and Munster especially. But let's talk about Leinster and Munster. Is because the way that their tax system works as well is they're rewarded, obviously, if they finish in Ireland, etc., etc. And also, I'm only going based on a player. Some of the salaries that you hear that some of the higher profile internationals, especially when I was playing, would be matched by what they'd get if they were going to the top 14. So it didn't really make sense unless they wanted an experience to go to France to play. So, I mean, without opening you up, is there a salary cap?
There's no salary cap in URC. There's salary cap in the South African context, which they're looking at themselves, because I think now they're here, they realise they've got to be more competitive. Those South African franchises are actually privately owned by the Western Province. The Stormers is actually owned by the Western Province, the union. The other 3 have independent private backers, but they're not allowed to spend above the salary cap. So in a sense, even though they're willing to, they're not allowed to. So they're going to look at that. But no, we don't have one that's sort of URC applied. I mean, the other point there, Jim, you make, which is obviously well made, is also to play for Ireland, you need to be in Ireland. And that keeps a fair few players there, because rightly, they want to play for their country. So there are different aspects at play, I think, of why a player stays or doesn't.
A question just around the South African teams joining the URC. Is this, and it's a bit of a cheeky question for me, is it a bit of a precursor to potentially South Africa joining the Six Nations, or are they things that have been whispered?
I do not know that. I mean, I think we're probably that entity that can show you that it could be done, right? And actually, for me, probably makes more sense is that even if they don't join the Six Nations or Seven Nations, it's aligning the Rugby Championship with Six Nations. So you've got one international season that's the same, depending whether you're playing the South or the North. But now I don't know whether that's a precursor or not. I think operationally it would work, but there's a lot more at play, I think, there.
Yeah, and on that, you mentioned about the global season. We've had Sir Bill Beaumont come on here, and we had Augustin Pichot when they were battling head to head for the being chairman of World Rugby. But from an outsider, we're not seeing much of and we've said it on this podcast, we're not seeing much of a difference from where we were. Everyone talked in COVID around this is a great time to reset and align everything. Are there big conversations going on to try and get that push forward? Because at the minute, the last thing we saw was the World 12s wanting to do a competition in August, where you're like, hold on a minute, that's absolutely ridiculous. So, is there, and I know that's separate to anything to do with World Rugby, but is there, a lot of effort going in to try and get a global calendar?
Yeah, there is. I just think, as you know rightly, that there's so many different competing interests. And I think one thing that we're trying to say, we are as an entity partly owned by CBC, but majority owned by unions. But then all of our club CEOs are our stakeholders, right? So it's a slightly odd scenario and then all of our clubs are slightly differently owned. Some are owned by the SRU or some are owned by private individuals. So what we would, a lot of work needs to go in to say, even if you play slightly less rugby overall, you change it around, it doesn't detract value from either the leagues or from the international game. And I'm not sure that point's massively landed yet. I don't think people are agreed on that. And so there's still a lot more work to do, unfortunately.
And with all this happening, Martin, all this going on, and I'll just reiterate again, I think it's a huge positive, having been in the middle of the new tournament, the fans, the South African teams coming in. One of the most interesting plays and that kind of came left field is Rock Nation's involvement. And we're seeing the momentum gather. If you follow Maro Itoje on Instagram, he was with Jay-Z at the Premier, and he's obviously a Rock Nation athlete. Cheslin Colby, Sia Khaleesi, there's due to be another high-profile player that's going to fall under that umbrella as well. I've had a couple of chats with Michael Yormark, the CEO and president of Rock Nation Sport. Initially, when I saw it, it almost seemed like a very out-of-the-box collaboration. Jay-Z's Rock Nation company, big American company, the music scene, and Connacht, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Swansea. Was a little bit of it smoke and mirrors, or is there a real kind of, not urgency, but is there a real interest from a company like Rock Nation to grow the game? What do they see, do you think, in this URC comp?
Yeah, I was with Michael on the Ospreys game, and they are involved with the Sharks ownership structure, and actually Michael consults to the new Saracens owners, right? So I think he is just full of enthusiasm, which is one thing. It's what we need. You need people with real positivity. It comes with genuine basis and expertise. He has been CEO of 2 professional franchises. He was the youngest ever CEO of a professional franchise in the States, 31. So he comes with a wealth of experience of how to develop a professional franchise in the States in 2 different sports, in basketball and NHL and ice hockey. I think in rugby, he just sees the huge potential, and so do I. There's normally 3 aspects to a professional game. There's the league, there's a club, and there's the players. And in rugby, for some reason, I've obviously played as well, players aren't supposed to put their head above the parapet that often, right? And it's only until you retire that you're then thrust into the media and said, go and talk about the game. So, and he believes the same thing as I do, is the players could be much more involved from day one in that trio, right? It should be a mutually beneficial exchange of value between the player, the club, and the league. And for some reason at the moment, and I've got a session on Tuesday with our club CEOs, all 16 CEOs are going to come or zoom in to a meeting with Michael to understand what we're saying about that. What we're saying is that a player is the reason why my kids follow rugby.
Yeah.
My kids aren't a fan of Saracens, they're a fan of Maritoji. So why would you not ask the player, and it'd be mutually beneficial to the player, a partnership with that player to help them sell the club, sell tickets to the but also to the league. And that's the thing we're trying to see, because that's the untapped potential, I think.
Great, good stuff. Last thing on Rock Nation then, and what the masses are, millions of listeners want to know. Come finals time for the URC this year, you announce it here live. Jay-Z and Beyonce, they're performing, aren't they? He's got to tell us now. It's got to be.
Edinburgh versus Leicester.
It's Rihanna, actually, yeah. So.
Rihanna as well. Yeah, we'll have them all. We'll have them all over for the URC final.
Yeah.
Man,
DJ in half-time set, so we're all good.
Man, there's a fair bit of excitement in the Southern Hemisphere about the progress around the World Club Championship. Getting the likes of the Crusaders and Blues up here playing against, Leinster, Exeter, those kind of clubs.
Edinburgh.
Yeah, those sort of clubs.
They're on fire.
Leicester, Wasps, yeah, my old clubs as well.
and there's some pretty big names saying that it's making quite a bit of progress. Are you involved in any of those chats, and do you know much about that?
Yeah, no, we're involved because it's we're looking at how, again, trying to use the weekends that we've got. And actually, Simon Halliday said this in the press the other day, which is spot on. Like, we're not trying to add new weekends. What we realised is that if we could take the Champions Cup weekends in any fourth year, and then put the top 8 sides from the north versus top 8 sides from the south, then you've got something that could work over a 4 or 5 weekend period. NZR and the franchises in New Zealand are really up for it, and so same in Rugby Australia. And do you know, and again, I don't know what you guys think, right? But I think rugby's got a slightly novel opportunity with this that football doesn't have, right? Because all the best teams are in Europe anyway in football.
Yeah.
But who knows in rugby, right? I think the Crusaders are probably up there. I think the Brumbies are probably still up there. The Reds are probably coming back into it. And then in 2 cycles' time, have done enough to help Japan come in. Have we done enough that an American team could be there in 8 years' time? So that's the bit I really like, just because most people love their rugby. They want to see Japan be really strong, and they want to see America and Canada be really strong. If you've seen the results at the weekend, Canada are out of the World Cup.
First time ever.
It's from my sort of heyday, or if you like, or when I was first coming into rugby, Canada was pretty strong. So something's happening there. I know they've got the Toronto Arrows in the MLR that will do better for them. But then on the flip side, you've got Uruguay and Chile, who could be really important to the game going forward. So I think one thing I'm really interested in working on is how do we as club leagues really help the MLR, really help the South American League, help the Japanese League, work with Super Rugby. And the thing that I think can bind us all together and create a really powerful quadrennial tournament is a World Club Cup.
So what's the next step with that actually happening? Do you know when it might go through?
I think we're pushing for 2024, because it's sort of that slot immediately after the World Cup and then before the Lions tour. Go back to that calendar point. It's just not a lot of room, is there?
Yeah.
To fit it in. But if it's something that the Southern Hemisphere teams really want to push, which I hope they do, then it should come off.
All right, Martin. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Very enlightening. You've been very candid. Really appreciate it. And best of luck with the rest of the URC, mate. Well, shall we finish things off then with the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Yes, let's, Andy Rowe and James. Loads of good as ever in the world of rugby. We're going to start off. We've had a bit of a URC theme this weekend, so we're going to start off there. Munster absolutely dominated the Scarlets down into Leslie, spanking them 43 points to 13. I could give a shout out for one of the tries. Jack O'Donoghue, the back row, what a beast he is. He makes hell of a break and then puts a lovely kick through. A number 6 putting a kick through for Liam Coombs' try. So hell of an effort from Munster. They're looking pretty special at the minute. Where else should we go in the world of rugby? Let's go to Uruguay. They became the first team from the Americas to qualify for the 2023 World Cup in France by beating the USA 34 points to 15. Their reward for getting to the World Cup is facing the All Blacks and France for the first time ever. So, just enjoy it, Uruguay, while it lasts, because that's going to be some tough inclusion into the World Cup. But a hell of an effort from those boys. Let's go back to the URC, shall we? Because Adam Burns scored 2 tries on his return for Leinster after 22 months out injured. So big tip of the slipper to him. Staying in the URC, the Dragons, they beat Connacht 35 points to 22 away from home for their first win of the season. But it's their first win ever, basically. So well done to those boys. And it's their first win at the sports ground since 2004. So top effort by the Dragons boys. The Bulls, they're going to get a mention this week. They came back from 16-3 down at halftime to beat Cardiff 29-19 and get their first win in the URC. So we'll tip the slipper to those boys. But it's all about the Premiership from here on in. Leicester, they get a mention in the Good. Still unbeaten this season, still in the Good. Their best start to a Premiership rugby season for 21 years. 2 decades, they've not won 4 games on the spin. And when do you go back to, Andy Rowe? 21 years ago?
Oh, let me guess, when you were playing?
Yes, as you know, mate, as you know. We started the season in 2000, 4 victories on the spin. So a hell of an effort from the Leicester boys. Well done to them. What else was good? Sam Simmons back in an Exeter jersey after the Lions tour. He had his first baby last week. And then he returned for Exeter and scored 2 tries. Of course he did. He's going to be top try scorer again this year. So tip of the slipper to Sam Simmons and especially their returning Lions boys. Eddie Jones, just pick him. Pick him and Don Brandt. Pick them both in the same team. He was pretty special. What else was good? Wasps, we've got to get them in the Good. They won, didn't they? The Andy Good sweep was absolutely rammed. No doubt it was. So they get a mention in the Good. But the Good this week goes to Jim's favourite team. There's a few mentions within this as well. Harlequins were just absolutely phenomenal. They came back from 21-0 down to beat Bristol Bears 52-24. Oh, my Bristols. Oh, my defence. Oh, my fitness. But let's make this all about Quins. We'll start off with Will Collier. 134 Premiership games without scoring a try. And then you dummy 3 or 4 players and sprint or waddle your way in from 25 metres out. Hell of an effort from him. Marcus Smith was absolutely ridiculous, ball in hand. Lewis Liner, they all played astonishingly well. Esther Hazen was quality. Don Brandt, ridiculous. So the Good this week goes to the mighty Harlequins. Yeah, the bad, few bits of bad. And we're going to start off in Munster as well. We started in the Good for Munster. We're going to start off in the bad. And the bad news is RG Snyman has re-ruptured his ACL after coming off the bench for Munster last week. Not good news for him to re-rupture your ACL. A lot of rehab, a lot of pain to get through. So we wish him all the best. We're going over to France now. Biarritz, they're going to get a mention in the bad. We've put them in the Good a couple of times. They're in the bad this week. They lost 40 points to 5 at home to Lyon. And unfortunately, they're bottom of the top 14 now. So not great for them. Scarlets, they get a mention in the bad. They lost 43-13, as we said earlier, to Munster. Not great at all. So they get a mention in the bad. Saints, ill discipline, really poor in the second half. So they're going to get absolutely hammered this week by Chris Boyd. London Irish, they're going to get a mention in the bad this week. They've now not won a game in the first 4 rounds. They drew with Sale, of course they did, but they haven't won a game in the first 4 rounds, so they get a mention in the bad this week. But the bad can only go to one nation, one team, one nation, and that goes to Canada. Unfortunately, all you Canadian listeners this week, they've qualified for every single Rugby World Cup so far, but won't be there in 2023 after they were eliminated by Chile at the weekend. It was a shock loss on Saturday, and they've now failed to qualify for the World Cup for the first time ever. So Canada, you get the bad. And then the ugly. We mentioned Chile in the bad because they beat Canada. Now, I thought about putting Chile in the Good. But they haven't qualified for the World Cup yet, so I didn't. And the main reason I didn't put them in the Good was for this one reason. We mentioned in the bad about Canada losing to Chile, but the ugly this week has got to go to the picture that we've seen go around on social media. Canadian scrum half Jamie McKenzie tweeted the photo of one of the Chile players literally trying to gouge the eyes out of a Canada player on the floor. He's having a proper dig around the eyeballs. As Jim says, one of the worst things you can do to a man. So hopefully World Rugby will take a look at that and an applicable ban will come, because it should be, being the chief citing officer and judicial officer that I am on this rugby pod, that should be at least a 26-week ban for gouging. It looked awful. So Chile, you may have beaten Canada, but you get the ugly this week for the gouge.
Thanks, Gertie. Thanks, Jim. Thank you very much for listening. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify and go to Eventbrite. Get your tickets for our live show in Cardiff in November.